Hello, and welcome to another Positive Cinematic Spotlight, where we look at movies to find encouragement and inspiration for the educational community. It's November 30th, so we're back from Thanksgiving. I hope you were able to see your family, whether it be virtually or in person. I hope you ate some great food. I hope you're rested, and I hope that you are ready and energized for the next few weeks leading into winter break. Um, the winter holidays are coming, and so it's time for us to shift our focus to Christmas movies. There are other winter holidays. I suspect there are movies involving those winter holidays. I am not familiar with them. If you have any recommendations, please let me know. The movie that we're going to look at this week is a 1988 Christmas classic, Die Hard. Now, some of you might be saying, now hold up. Die Hard's not a Christmas movie. And I'm going to be honest, I agree with you. I don't usually consider Die Hard a Christmas movie. But do know enough people who count it as a Christmas movie. I have seen it on enough Christmas movie lists published online, to accept it as a Christmas movie. And our protagonist in the movie, John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, there we go, um, gives me some interesting ideas to talk about that I'm sure I've mentioned before, but I feel like it's a good time to bring those back. If you're not familiar with Die Hard, uh, Bruce Willis plays John McCain, a New York police officer who travels to California to spend Christmas with his wife and children, his wife being in California for a job. Um, it's unclear how long it's been since he saw them. It is suggested that he plans to move to California, but he had too many responsibilities with the New York Police Department, too many open cases he was not comfortable leaving behind, and so he's finishing those up before he moves to California. When he goes to see his wife at her business, her place of employment, um, it's a short while later that terrorists come in and take the employees as uh, uh, hostages. And John, who was not down at the party yet, he was getting himself refreshed from the airplane ride. He decides to try and stop the terrorists from whatever their goal is. And of course, that's a big mystery for the movie. What are the terrorists' goal? Everybody's at the office building because they have completed a big deal. They're celebrating the big deal and used that as an excuse to throw a Christmas party. Yes, on Christmas Eve. Um, so the character of John McClane in this action adventure is, in my opinion, kind of a standout from your usual action adventure heroes. There are some qualities that he has that, at least in this movie, I've not gone back to double check to see that they're all there for his sequels. But at least in this movie, he's got qualities that you don't see in most action adventure heroes, as far as I can recall. Um, and those are the qualities that I want to talk about because we can learn from John McClane in the movie Die Hard. Of course, it'd be easy to talk about being brave. It'd be easy to talk about sacrificing yourself for the common good. Uh, we can talk about looking out um, for our loved ones. We can talk about uh, thinking through your options and planning ahead, which is something that John McClane does throughout his um, his conflict with the terrorists. But there are two things that are easily overlooked that really caught my eye on rewatching this movie. The beginning of the movie starts off with John in an airplane. He's not comfortable flying, and his the person sitting next to him in the airplane notices how tense he is as they land, and he gives John advice to walk around barefoot, gripping the carpet, gripping the floor with your toes. He said it's calming and it'll help settle you down. One of the things that you can tell in Bruce Willis's performance is that he shows, without actually saying anything rude, that John McClane clearly is skeptical of this advice. But later on in the film, we see him in his wife's office after an unpleasant encounter with his wife, with his feet bare, gripping the carpet underneath his toes. Even though he was skeptical, he was open minded enough and willing to listen to advice enough to give it a shot. And it's clear that he was surprised that it did, in fact, work. Another uh, moment that, again, is easily missed and forgotten about is when John is watching the terrorists, trying to figure out who they are, what they're doing, trying to get all the information he can. He sees the terrorists speak with the head of the company and kill them. Spoilers, but the movie's been around forever, and it's really not. It's early on in the movie, so um, it's not that big of a ruin. Um, he leaves seeing this, criticizing himself, saying, "John, why didn't you do something to save him?" But then he answered himself, saying, "Because then you'd also be dead." And that shows that John is self reflective. He makes a decision, he sees the outcome, and rather than just accepting the outcome, especially since it's a negative outcome, he questions, well, was there a better way of doing that? Was there something else that he could have done? In this case, there was not. Um, he does it earlier in the film when he uh, sees his wife for the first time, and as I said, an unclear amount of time, when he sees that she has gone to using her maiden name rather than his name as his wife, and he criticizes her for it and challenges her about the reasons why she would change her name, and she tries to explain, and you can tell in her cut off response that it is based on uh, Japanese business beliefs about married women. We don't get the whole explanation because John cuts her off. So it's a negative interaction between him and his wife, who he was looking forward to seeing and uh, wants to, have a positive Christmas with. But he's starting off on the wrong foot. After she leaves the room, he says, "Way to go, John, real mature." Again, showing that he is self reflective. He thinks about his actions, he thinks about the consequences of his actions, and in this case, he does see, yes, in fact, he was in the wrong, that he had other options and there are other ways to handle the situation than the way he did, and um, his reaction made things worse. So these two qualities are things that you often don't see in action heroes, because action heroes a lot of times are sure of themselves, they are brave, they know what to do to solve the problem. They don't have to second guess themselves. So John McClane to me is a more realistic action hero, and one that we can certainly learn from. We can we can take his example and listen to other people's points of view. Even if we're skeptical, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't give it a shot. Um, Especially if there's nothing contradicting that advice. Um, and with so much being new and unusual this year, getting advice that might seem not helpful, that might leave you skeptical, might actually be something beneficial because it's new to us. It's unusual, and so it might seem odd, but it might work. And so we should keep our minds open and our ears open for when people are trying to help us out, even if we our first reaction is, I don't know, that sounds a little bit out there. Same thing with being self-reflective. We should take John McClane's example and adapt it ourselves. And when things don't work out the way we want them to, be self reflective first, focusing on ourselves. What did I do that may have made this situation worse? Was there a way that I could have handled it better? And this is great practice when dealing with students, parents, coworkers, administrators, because if we don't look at how we are affecting the situation, then we are limiting our ability to alter and change the situation we're trying to deal with. Because the only person that we actually have control over is ourselves. We can say, "Oh, I've got control of that classroom. I've got control of these students." But they still have free will and they can choose to do anything they want to, regardless of the punishments or the incentives that you have. So the only true effect that you have is yourself. And of course, if you when we have a disciplinary issue in a classroom and it doesn't go well, we know this because we look at, well, what can I do to get better control of this class? What can I do to better uh, deal with this student who is disrupting my class? But also remember, sometimes the answer might be I need to take a step back, just like John McClane said. You know what? That wasn't mature. Sometimes we need to control ourselves better, not find ways to influence our students on how to behave. Excuse me, a short, uh, uh, frustrated response that the student can pick up on can lead to a negative interaction. And yes, the student might overreact. Students overreact. I know you don't believe that that happens, but it does happen in some schools. So, yes, the student might overreact, but did we give them a reason to overreact? And let's be honest, after all that sarcasm, yes, students can overreact with nothing to overreact to. So it's not going to be a surefire fix to all situations, but start thinking first about yourself. What could I have done to better handle this situation? And sometimes the answer is exactly what John said. Well, there wasn't any other better solution because if I did anything else, then it would have gone even worse. Okay? So, those are things that we can learn from John McClane. Now, John McClane's not the only person that we can get some inspiration from because there's also Sergeant Al Powell. Now, Sergeant Powell is a police officer outside the building. He's communicating with John through a walkie talkie, and trying to support John and encourage John to keep it together. He's also trying to be a bridge between John and his superiors, who are critical of John's influence in the situation. Um, and so uh, Sergeant Al Powell gives us that example of someone who uh, doesn't back away from somebody in need, something that many of us need, not just many of us, all of us need. We need somebody in our corner. And John needed Sergeant Powell in his corner. What we see is that a lot of the characters in this movie who are not John and Sergeant Powell, they have a problem with going in and not listening to other people's point of view, listening to other options, and they suffer for it, whether it be a public humiliation type of scenario or worse. And so clearly, whether it's the writer or the director, could go either way. Um, but they clearly felt that listening to others and not going in, oh, I've got this all under control, I know everything to do, I don't have to listen to anybody, that kind of attitude is a bad attitude to have, and that we need to be open to others and we need to support others, which we see with Sergeant Powell. Now, part of the problem with that is that when we shut down last year, and parents were having to try and encourage their children to do the classwork that we were sending them virtually, there was a lot of love for teachers at that time. Oh, how they missed us. Um, and we got all kinds of love because uh, parents were all of a sudden having to try and keep their children focused on the classwork assignments. We were sending stuff. Many of us were available for communication with students, but there was a whole lot of families trying to guide families in classroom assignments that were provided by teachers. Um, kind of like trying to provide sub plans for a dozen, 2 dozen different substitute teachers and hoping that they all communicate the lesson as well as we would have. And of course, that doesn't work. There's a reason why we try to avoid using substitute teachers. They do not have the same effect. We are thankful when they are there, when we need them, so that there is somebody there, but it's not as effective a learning situation because uh, they're trying to implement a lesson that I prepared, and it doesn't ever uh, come across as well. So with all this love, hey, it was feeling good, but then it came time to start talking about coming back to school, and there were debates. Should we go back 5 days normal traditional school? Should we do all virtual? Is there a hybrid model that would work? And then the 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 internet trolls came out. The anger about suggesting that teachers were trying to be lazy because they thought that teaching virtually would be easier for us. And anybody who's tried to have a class over a uh, computer camera, um, we all know it is not easier. And but there's that illusion, that misbelief that we were just trying to keep things easy for us, when really many of us were willing to go the harder route for the health benefits of our students. And one of the things that a couple of the things I should say that Sergeant Powell says harkens back to that feeling of needing support. Uh, Sergeant Powell says to his superior, uh, Dwayne T. Robinson, um, the man is hurting, he is alone, tired, and he hasn't seen diddly squat from anybody down here. Now you're going to stand there and tell me that he's going to care about what you do to him if he makes it out of there alive. Why don't you wake up and smell what you're shoveling? And so he's letting them know it was his opinion that John McClane needed some support. He didn't need to be threatened, um, because he's there, he's dealing with the situation, and Dwayne Robinson was just hearing about what was going on. He had his own, he went in, like I was talking about before, I'm in charge, I got this, I know what to do, I'm in charge, I'm the boss. Um, I don't have to listen to anybody because I know what the rule book says about handling this situation. But the what he thought he was dealing with was not exactly what was actually going on. And so that disconnect makes it difficult for Dwayne Robinson, who does have everybody's uh, well being as one of his goals, but he doesn't have all the information and he doesn't trust that John McClane's information is correct. He's critical of it, which, if we're going to be honest, is also kind of understandable as well. Some strange person from inside the building, but the length to which Robinson is not willing to listen and to listen to Sergeant Powell's reasons why he feels like John can be trusted is, of course, excessive and leads to trouble. And in fact, John himself says over the walkie talkie to Sergeant Powell, I'm feeling unappreciated. And that's a feeling that it seems like there may be several teachers out there feeling that way because, I've heard about teachers leaving the virtual program uh, because of the amount of work required and probably not feeling appreciated. We are willing to do a whole lot more work when we feel appreciated, whether it's virtually or live action classroom traditional style. Um, and of course, there are a lot of teachers who have stepped out of the classroom for concern of their health and, again, that lack of appreciation that a lot of times we feel. All that being said, one, I want you to know that there are people who appreciate you. I guarantee it. They might not communicate it, but if you stop and think about it, you will be able to identify people who appreciate what you are doing. It might be some of the students in your classroom. If you're lucky, all the students in your classroom, but there are some students who are not going to feel that level of connection and appreciation because they have not matured there yet, regardless of age, because we all mature at different rates. But you may be able to identify some students that appreciate you being there, whether it's on camera or live in person. You can probably identify some teachers who appreciate that you are there. And you know what? It might be just the most basic, well, at least that teacher's here today because that means I don't have to cover that person's class. Very basic and um, not very uh, sympathetic, I guess I would say. Um, but it's still an appreciation. But I believe that we as teachers, um, we've got people in our building who appreciate we are here honestly, not just because we're in the classroom so they don't have to cover it, but because we do something for them, whether it's provide them an ear to listen to, um, uh, lighthearted jokes to get their mind off of things, some kind of companionship, friendship, co-workers getting along and working together, supporting each other. And so one of my big themes this year has been supporting each other. And Al, Sergeant Al Powell reminds us of that we need to support each other. It's a trying time, it's an unusual time. We don't know exactly what's going on. Things change all the time. And the coronavirus is um, just popping up more and more. We need to support each other. And even though we hear things online, step away from the online sites, step away from Facebook and Twitter, where people can get online. And even if their account name is their name, like on Facebook, most of us have our names. Even on Twitter, some of us have our names. The fact that you're not standing right there in front of somebody saying these horrible things makes people feel okay about saying these horrible things. Step away. They might be frustrated. They definitely have their own concerns and their own issues that they are dealing with. Step away, because right now it might not sound like they appreciate you and they might be critical of how things are going. I guarantee if you weren't there, then they would be missing you. We saw it last year, and it would happen again this year. If it happens again, we'll have the same reaction. Um, I want to thank everybody for everything that you do. I want to thank you for being the best. And I want to wish you a very early Merry Christmas, because that's on the way. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. And I'll see you next week.